Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about why the entire concept of leg day, meaning having an actual day every week for your legs, and the accompanying type of training that tends to go with it, not only produces suboptimal gains in both size and strength in your legs, but why it ultimately leads people to not want to train their legs. And for anyone who doubts where I'm going to go with this, stop and think about all the leg day memes that you see on your social media. The mere fact that you have people talking about how they can't walk after leg day, how sore they are, all this other stuff, like they brace themselves for leg day, like it's something hardcore or difficult, or it's going to be horrific for them, should tell you that there's something really, really, really wrong with the entire concept behind it. Because honestly, leg training really isn't that difficult. It doesn't even make you sore when done correctly. And I'm telling you guys this as someone who you've seen squat over 500 raw on camera as a middle-aged man, right? I have reasonable leg development. So let's get to the point. Number one, it comes down to training workloads and muscle protein synthesis uptime. And you start looking at the data that's out there, what do you find? That maximum muscle growth is almost never achieved in a muscle when it's studied unless that muscle is trained at least twice a week, right? That is universally agreed upon by almost every exercise physiology researcher at this point, because their findings all find that. Whether they argue whether more than two is beneficial or not is a major point of contention. But it's almost universal at this point that twice a week is really your minimum to maximize hypertrophy in any muscle. Now, strength, we could get into a whole nother debate there as far as technique and all of that, but that's your minimum. That's your minimum to get a maximum growth response. Well, you see people who already jump and say, well, how can I do 20 hard sets with 4 reps twice a week? And it's like, because you're not supposed to. Now, the truth is, when we start looking at different studies that look at muscle growth, we know that muscles don't grow longer than about 48 hours. And that's after a really intense session. Like, it takes a lot of work to make a muscle grow for 48 hours after you train it to grow that long. And the problem you have is that if you're only training a muscle once a week, what happens? You have at most 2 days of growth per week. Well, that's not ideal. And we go back to the different studies that look at this. Some studies have shown, in some cases, maximum growth is achieved with 5 or 6 times a week on a given muscle. That would make a lot more sense when you look at the data on muscle protein synthesis. But twice a week is considered to be the minimum by virtually every expert. And these are experts who have to coach professional athletes and stuff on top of it. These aren't always just guys that you're thinking of in lab coats. A lot of these researchers themselves are competitive athletes. A lot of them are coaches of serious elite level athletes. And that's what their findings are finding. And that's the problem, is that when you start having a leg day, guess what? You're only training your legs once a week, and it's usually with this enormous amounts of volume. And then people say, well, isn't that what these pro bodybuilders do? Well, what is it that you've heard coaches say forever about pro bodybuilders? You guys remember what the famous coach Bill Starr said about professional bodybuilders? He said that the average professional bodybuilder is not qualified to teach a high school football team in the weight room. And he was right. Most of them are complete ignoramuses. They are where they are because of enormous mind-boggling drug abuse. And I know people are like, that's one of my catchphrases, mind-boggling amounts of drug abuse. Because it is. You don't become a professional bodybuilder on conservative amounts of steroids. So when people say, well, lots of people use steroids. All right, using steroids is not the same as using pro bodybuilder amounts of steroids. That's like saying lots of people drink alcohol, so it's the same thing as downing 2 fists of Jack Daniels every single night, and then getting cirrhosis of your liver by the time you're 25, right? It's not exactly the same thing. Using alcohol is not the same as being a severe alcoholic who gets completely plastered every single night and passes out drunk. See the difference? It's not the same thing. That's the difference between some people who use anabolics versus pro bodybuilders. Most pro bodybuilders are using amounts that would scare you. So their training knowledge can't be taken seriously. And what you need to understand is that when they put all these cocktails into their body, maybe there's some physical changes to their body that different training methods might actually work differently. People need to consider that also. Although I tend to say that the way they train doesn't really matter at all. I mean, there's a certain threshold on the drugs. The drugs become the stimulus for muscle growth, not what you do in the gym at a certain point. But that's the problem you have. That's where this sort of training comes from. And then they want to do large amounts of volume that you can't recover from, that makes you really sore. And then it's oftentimes, oh, what other stuff can we do? Can we add supersets? Can we add force reps? Can we do all this goofy bro stuff while doing 20 sets for your legs? And then people wonder why they can't walk. And they do it because, well, this bodybuilder did it and he had these jacked legs. And it's like, you can't even afford his drug stack. What are you worried about his training? Like, when you don't make enough money at your job to even buy his drug stack, you don't need to worry about his training. It doesn't matter what he did. When he's got a $40,000 a year drug bill, maybe if you want to get his results, that's what you need to be thinking about, not what he does in the gym. Truth is, that sort of training just makes people sore. And if people are too sore to train their legs, they're not going to want to keep doing it long term. And that's detrimental, because when it comes to fitness and health, which muscles impact your health the most? I mean, if you were to only look at one group of muscles anywhere in your body and look at all the scientific research and which muscles are going to actually improve your health and your fitness long term through the course of your life, which ones do you think matter the most? I mean, we should train everything. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying you shouldn't have strong arms. I'm not saying you shouldn't train your shoulders. But if you, for some reason, could only train one thing, what would give you the most health benefits? Your legs. Your legs. They're the most important for your health and fitness. They absolutely are. They aren't everything, but if you were to rank them in terms of importance, they are. Well, people don't want to train legs because of the soreness and all the other stuff accompanied with this whole leg day nonsense. When the reality is, you should probably be training your legs 2 or 3 times a week. Well, if that's the case, and most people really only need to be lifting weights 3 or 4 times a week, what does that tell you about the leg day? It needs to go away. You should, if you're going to train 3 days a week, you should probably train your legs every time you're at the gym. If you're going to train 4 days a week, you need at least twice. So even if you're doing an upper-lower split or something like that, all right? That's how drug-free people need to be training. They don't need to have body parts splits. You don't need an arm day. You don't need a leg day. You don't need that stuff. And people need to look at reasonable training volumes. The majority of the research shows that somewhere between 5 and 10 sets for a muscle group in a workout, for most people in most studies, is the limit. You don't really gain additional muscle beyond that threshold. You can create an environment where you might, but for most people, you probably aren't. So when you look at it from that perspective and you start thinking, wait a minute, I only need 5 to 10 sets for a muscle to make it grow maximally, and I need to be training it at least twice a week, well, you do the math yourself. That's going to be a lot less sets than people are thinking they need to do, isn't it? It's going to be a lot less sets. And they're all not done at once. And do you know what else we find? You know what causes soreness? Do people really think it's heavy training that causes soreness? No. Training a muscle too infrequently actually makes you more sore. In other words, if you were to train a muscle once a week versus training it twice a week, it's actually going to make you more sore, even if you did the same amount of work. In other words, the more frequently that you train a muscle, the less sore it gets. Do you know what else causes soreness? Doing more training volume than you can recover from. When you factor those two things in, it makes sense why doing a super intense high volume leg day once a week makes you so sore you can't walk. Of course it does. You know what else makes you sore? Eccentric focused. Doing really slow eccentrics, forced eccentrics, things like that. Those also cause the most soreness out of any type of reps. How many of these bro methods have people doing silly stuff like that? Oh, control the weight, squeeze, all this nonsense. Yeah, it makes you more sore. And it's more sore without necessarily more muscle growth. Leg day is actually hurting your gains and hurting your health, and it's hurting your desire to actually do good exercises like barbell squats and deadlifts and things like that. And the reality is these are the most important exercises. And this whole leg day and the leg day meme is really creating a situation to where leg training becomes undesirable, uncomfortable, unfavorable, instead of really being your top priority, which it should be. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.